if I didn't take the soldiers out when there was a gap in the calendar, I would get absolute stick, because we were so badly paid in those days. And my wage would have been probably, thinking about it, was I think £72 a month with local overseas allowance, which was over 50% of my pay. So there you go, £36 a month. And that would have been 1971. My soldiers were, well, now would be viewed as below the poverty line. That's what they were paid. So going on exercise meant that they didn't have to pay food charges and they didn't have to pay accommodation charges. And we got allowances for going on exercise. So that's why these boys wanted to go on exercise. It wasn't just the fun of going on exercise and doing training and all this sort of stuff, which they took very seriously. But when I came back to UK to take on a regular commission, I was then posted to the Strategic Regiment in Bulford, and that's when I really learned how badly paid the soldiers were. Remember, this is before, dare I say it, Margaret Thatcher came along and sorted our lives out for us. But there are a couple of anecdotes that are well worth talking about soldiers in sort of 72, 73, 74, who are based in the UK. Captains would get benefits because they were so badly paid. So a captain in the army in 1973-74 could claim benefits from the government. Did they? Most of them were too proud to claim from their country because they weren't adequately paid. In the other rank structure, you had to be a sergeant with 2 children before you got out of the benefits trap, so to speak. Why did I know this? Well, every second Friday, I paid every soldier over the table in cash, because 75% of the soldiers, remember I'm talking 1972, 73 now, well over 50% of the soldiers would not have had a bank account. And most of the wives would be waiting outside the camp gates to at least get 50% of that pay off the soldiers, because if you weren't careful, they'd be down the pub and away to go. Extraordinary times with extraordinary young people. We worked 2 Saturday mornings a month because soldiers were paid on a daily rate and they wanted to come in and work on a Saturday morning. And actually, although it was not as busy operationally as it is now, it was much more demanding trying to maintain the knackered old kit that we had. 2 of the more entertaining moments in that particular regiment. One was dustbin collection. I don't know if you remember, the 70s were littered with strikes of every kind. And dustbin collection was one that we got into, refuse collection, whatever you want to call it. This is in the days before Veridus and all these very efficient firms that you have nowadays. They were all council workers, which is fair enough, but they decided they weren't being paid enough. Now remember that I've said that soldiers were on benefits up to the rank of sergeant and captain. And we were told we had to go and clear the streets of London and Glasgow and anywhere else in the United Kingdom. We could not understand by the end of day 2 why it was taking people so long to clear the litter and rubbish and all the dustbins and all this sort of stuff. I mean, we cracked it by 10:30 every morning. Because, of course, boys working in a team, got a job to do, get on, we didn't have targets. Why do you need targets when you've got disciplined, motivated, energetic young men? And you might think that there was not a lot of fun collecting rubbish. I reckon that these boys had more fun collecting rubbish. And as they said, "Sir, have you seen the lady in number 27? I want to do that street next week as well." And the age-old squaddy humour would come out, and we'd be in the pub by 12 o'clock, and they thought this was a short day. And of course, I guess it was the beginning of a realisation that that you could do this efficiently, effectively, quickly, with properly motivated people, with a proper structure, with proper leadership. So they were dustbin collection. Then of course we had the wonderful saga of the Green Goddesses, the first firemen's strike, and Soldiers weren't particularly keen on driving the green goddesses at the speed they were meant to be driven at. I mean, soldiers put the right foot to the floor and that's it. And these things, we rolled a few of them. But the real truth is that the soldiers were deeply bored being firemen because they had nothing to do for hours and hours on end. But we set up slightly different command and control structures to those that had been in place at the time in the fire service, which I understand. I'm not taking any credit for this. This is the hierarchy in the military routine. But we brought into the organisation, simple things like maps and routes and prioritisation. There is a terrible tale that's actually repeated, unfortunately, in about 2000, and I guess I was a divisional commander by then. So one of my regiments, I think in 2003, we had another lot of firemen strikes, and the same green goddesses came out. And believe you me, they hose water, green goddesses. They're not particularly safe vehicles, but they really hose water in a way that modern machines perhaps don't. But the prioritisation, the incidents were almost exactly the same. Road traffic accident, firemen required, cut people out of motor cars. Soldiers being soldiers, you ask the question, fatality, alive, seriously wounded, very seriously wounded or injured, and you make a list of who has and hasn't been seriously injured. And in this first particular incident, the one driver in the car was dead. Nobody else was injured. The other car was a bit sort of smacked up and all this sort of stuff. So a bombardier, full corporal, that's all, young man in his mid-20s, makes the decision, because more calls are coming in of other accidents elsewhere. That might have been the first call, but the person is dead. There's nothing we can do. Everyone else is being tended to. And he, of his own authority, and quite rightly, decided that there were others, accidents, this was sort of ice and snow and all this sort of stuff, where people could be saved. At that time, and I'm not criticising the fire service here, but of course, first call, first response. And no thought of actually putting priorities into place and so on, or, for that matter, accepting responsibility. And that is a key element of being of the training that we had in the military. You accept responsibility for the decisions you make and where you go and how you go about your business.